Folks, I apologize. It looks like we should have been live, but we were not live, okay? And I was just here talking by myself. We did activate the live stream on YouTube, but for some reason it didn't go through. It didn't go through, so I was basically talking by myself for half an hour. So I apologize to you. I have here two questions for Sean, from Sean, and I'm gonna be happy to address them. And I'm just gonna be repeating myself, but I believe none of you were actually watching the live stream, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm just gonna actually go back and repeat what I was answering to Sean. Sean says, boa tarde, thank you for your time and expertise. You're very welcome, Sean. What percentage of nomad visas are declined at your firm? And can you please talk a little bit about the most common reasons nomad visas are declined? So, Sean, just providing a little bit of background information about the digital nomad. The digital nomad represents a way for the Brazilian government to make it easy for foreign citizens to come to Brazil and be able to stay for a longer period of time. Okay, so it is usually a low threshold type of visa, and in our experience, the only way for you to be denied is for you to not either provide what you are being asked for, or for you to have really serious problems in your background check. Okay, so sharing about the most common reason why digital nomad visas are denied here at the firm is going to be when the person does not provide what we are asking for. Okay, so let's say if we start an application, we set up a board, and then the person does not provide an apostille for the birth certificate. If they say, listen, I'm not going to provide, I understand you're asking me for an apostilled birth certificate, and I'm still not going to provide, this is going to eventually lead to a denial of the application because you are not meeting the requirements, okay? I would say that's the most common reason. And sometimes it's not that the person does not agree with delivering the document. It's more like the person is no longer interested in pursuing a longer term residency in Brazil. There are reasons for that. Sometimes, like the person gets a new job in the United States, so they don't want to come to Brazil anymore because they need to be working in person at a certain location in the US, so it's understandable. Another reason we saw happening in the past, maybe the digital nomad has a romantic relationship in Brazil, and that's the main reason why the digital nomad wants to stay in Brazil in the first place. And sometimes, this a relationship, breaks, and the person is no longer interested in pursuing. So I would say the number one reason is for people to change their minds and not deliver what they should deliver in order to be approved. The second reason is because of criminal records, and very interesting. Sometimes we have clients who are going to come to us, they are going to retain our services, and they are not going to disclose even during onboarding that they have serious criminal records, right? And usually something that is going to be a complete bar for foreign citizens to secure residency in Brazil. It's going to be actually the two things we saw happening before, right? And one, it was actually recent. It's going to be like crimes related to sex, so sex crimes, or crimes against minors. Those two things, whenever you have, it does not matter if this thing is like 20 years old. In our experience, 99% of the time is going to represent a bar for you to secure the residency. And the second one is like charges related to terrorism. And you may be surprised when I say like terrorism charge. But there is, it's not only the United States citizens and Europeans who love Brazil, but guess what? People from the Middle East, from Asia, from India, from Pakistan. So among those folks, there are going to be people with charges of terrorism. And whenever Brazil sees that, again, even if this thing is way into the past, Brazil is going to usually deny those applications outright. All right, so I hope that was helpful. Another participation by Sean. Are there any minimum requirements for a judge to determine someone is a stable union, or is it just case by case? So as of today, unfortunately, there are no minimum requirements. As of today, it's on a case by case basis, but there is always hope that the Brazilian legislative is going to enact some type of law or amendments to the Brazilian Civil Code to implement some minimum requirements, right? Because nowadays, even like to live together is no longer a requirement, and this was a requirement like 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago. If someone would come up with a união estável claim, the judge would ask, all right, are you guys living together? And if the answer was no, guess what? There was no stable union. But nowadays, what we see being decided is more like this. Well, in today's, like social media times, it's not necessary for people to be living in the same place. Sometimes you have, someone who's going to be traveling abroad very often, and they are going to meet in a hotel. They're going to stay together for 15 days, and then this person is going to fly away again, and then they're going to come back 15 days down the road. So nowadays, it's very easy for people to travel around, not only abroad, but inside the country as well. And the reasoning that judges have is that living together is no longer a requirement. And that's the same thing with other aspects of a união estável. Another thing that, in the past would be pretty solid is like this. You cannot claim a união estável unless you've been in a relationship for a couple of years, right? Now, not even that is enforced any longer. And even like for a relationship for less than a year, as long as other components are there, a judge could find an existing união estável. But I think, those decisions, they are not proper. I think they are going overboard with the união estável decisions. And I just hope that the legislative eventually is going to step in and bring more common sense to those decisions by codifying, by enacting a law that is going to make clear that a minimum set of requirements is needed for a união estável to be found. Didi, hello, oi, good to see you, Didi. Let us know what you want us to discuss today. The 552, good to see you over here, the 552. Good afternoon, Mr. Oliveira. The same thing happened to me today. Recorded a 20-minute client presentation and had to do it all over again because I didn't record. There you go. So it's not just me, right? And I'm always paying attention because, it's actually not the first time that this happens, but I don't know. I could swear I did click on the go live, but I didn't pay attention to make sure that the live stream was going live. But thank you for sharing the 552. WS Bill is in the house. Good to see you, Bill. How are things with you? Philippine Scenes, hello, sir. Good to see you over here. Raven Taylor, good afternoon, Luciano. I was interested in buying another property in Rio and wanted to get financial from a Brazilian bank, but they require an RNE. What would be the process of getting one? Raven, just let me, tell you that the RNE is not the only requirement for you to get finance in Brazil, right? The RNE, by the way, nowadays is not RNE any longer, it's RNM. Let's take a look over here, Raven. So as you can see, RNM, which stands for Registro Nacional do Migrante, or the registration or the national registration of the person immigrating to Brazil, right? So this is the card that they are talking about, but I guarantee that's just one of the requirements, right? And you also need to have a somewhat meaningful credit history in Brazil, so the lender can know that you are credit worthy, and they also may need to have a tax return filed in Brazil, because if you just provide your income abroad, it's very difficult for the Brazilian lender, to understand your income, or to even be sure that this income is legit, right? If you think it is true, like, I mean, you're going to be providing a bunch of papers from the United States, and they are unable to tell if those papers are legitimate or not. Now, if you're filing taxes in Brazil, the Brazilian authority, or the banks for the matter, they are going to know that you are making that amount of income. Otherwise, you wouldn't be paying taxes on that income, right? And they are going to be more willing to extend the finance to you, okay? Something I hear very often is like, well, but the realtor said as long as I have the RNM card, I'm good. They are gonna get me, finance, and this is usually, about the very optimistic nature of Brazilians. Even if there is a 5% chance or a 10% chance, guess what? They are gonna still try it, right? And they don't want to discourage you by saying, well, it's almost impossible. They're going to say, you know what, we're going to try, I'm going to get you the finance, but they are just like trying their best. But I can tell you, Raven, that the RNM card, the card that was showing to you, is just a small piece of the journey to get credit in Brazil. Bill says, oi Luciano, tudo bem? Everything good, Bill? Can you tell us what you like about Fortaleza? Yes, Luciano, just a blank screen for 30 minutes. Must be the time changing the US. Thank you for sharing, Bill. Yes, no, it was probably my mistake. I could swear I clicked on the go live button, but I can tell now it wasn't live, but I thank you for sharing. Yeah, so what I like about Fortaleza, there are different, right? And Fortaleza, by the way, is going to mean different things to different people. But in my case, Bill, what I like about Fortaleza, I think is still a land of opportunities, right? So when you invest, or when you go to Rio de Janeiro, those main neighborhoods, right, like Copacabana, Leblon, Ipanema, like the most traditional areas in Rio de Janeiro, they are completely built out. Like there is no more opportunity. Of course, you can always buy stuff, and even in Copacabana, right? Copacabana is not as, upscale as Leblon and Ipanema. Copacabana is a little bit more popular. And you can even buy, property. Sometimes if you buy a studio, like, several blocks from the beach, you could buy a studio for 100,000 US dollars, right? Which is not much by Rio de Janeiro standards. But if you're gonna buy a beachfront property in Rio de Janeiro, prices are gonna be in the millions of dollars, right? So I'm not talking about millions of reais. I'm gonna be talking about, millions of dollars, right? Now, if you go to Fortaleza, for the matter, there is a huge range of the coastal line that is still available for people to buy and to build upon those areas, right? So I think it's more this kind of feeling, Bill, of getting to a place in which you still have a shot of developing something really nice. Now, don't take me wrong. Like, I love Rio de Janeiro, and Rio de Janeiro is going to be unbeatable on so many fronts. But Ceará and Fortaleza, for those of you who don't know, Fortaleza is the capital of the state of Ceará, right? And I stay a lot of my time in Ceará, and I think it is this kind of feeling that you are building something for the future. And in Rio de Janeiro is more like you are living not in the future, but you are living whatever was developed a long time ago. And in Fortaleza, you have this feeling that things are in motion. Let me give you a more practical example. Until maybe a few years ago, the largest city, or let's say the capital of the northeast of Brazil, was the city of Salvador in the state of Bahia. But nowadays, Fortaleza is ahead of the pack. So, among all the cities and all the states in the northeast of Brazil, Ceará as a state and Fortaleza as a city have now, taken the first position in terms of development, in terms of, quality of education, which is something very interesting and telling about the future of that state. So I think, Bill, that for me, that's what I like the most about both Fortaleza and Ceará. We have here the real deal. The real deal says, Boa tarde, Luciano. Welcome, real deal. To qualify for the investment, Visa 1 million reais is using two properties to surpass this qualification amount more complicated, difficult, or just as easy as using one property. So the real deal, from the immigration application perspective, I don't think it does bring any type of complication, because you're gonna present a single application for the real estate investor visa, right? So it's not much more in terms of paperwork or an effort. However, on the real estate transaction, it's going to be basically double the effort, right? And whenever I am explaining, like whenever I have, for instance, a consultation with a client and I'm trying to explain our cost structure, I'm going to usually tell them, listen, whenever we are pricing our work with you, I'm thinking 95% of our energy and efforts are going to go into the real estate transaction, and only 5% is going to go into the immigration application, right? Because after you have everything compliant, you sent money the correct way, you bought properties that do qualify for the real estate investor visa. After all this work was done, the application is just like, busy paperwork. There is zero complexity for the real estate investor visa. Now, to get everything compliant is a completely different story, because you're going to need first to find the right property, to make sure title is clean. You're going to need to send money in a compliant manner. You're going to need to make sure that you get the title, and you do get the title, because until you get the title, you cannot even apply for the real estate investor visa, unless, of course, it's a pre-construction, which follows a different route, okay? So whenever you're telling me about two transactions, the real deal, I'm thinking about double the work, right? But again, from the immigration perspective, there is no additional complexity. The additional complexity is going to be on the real estate transactions themselves, if you will. All right, Colt Anderson. Good afternoon, Colt. Would my father's criminal record regarding business fraud affect my chances of getting a digital nomad visa? However, my record is clean. Thanks. Colt, zero concern. You shouldn't be concerned at all. We have something very well developed in the Brazilian legal system, in which people should not answer for their parents or for their children's mistake, right? So whatever happened to your father has absolutely no connection to your records, all right? So you just stay, you can have all the peace of mind that as long as your records are clean, you shouldn't have any issues at all on this front, all right, Coach? Wally Ken. Wally, welcome, Ali. I transfer 1550 per month from my company's bank account to my personal bank account as my salary. Would this be considered sufficient financial evidence for the embassy applying for the digital nomad? Wally, the problem with the application through an embassy or a consulate is that they have a very distinct approach or standards, right? Like, I mean, whenever you are applying in Brazil, it's a single body in Brazil, like reviewing the applications. They have the same training for the immigration officer. So we have a very good and a very close understanding of the standards and how the Brazilian immigration is going to review an application. Now, when you go through the embassy or the consulate, it becomes a different story because first thing, like the consulate officers, they are not really immigration analysts. So they are going to be handling a bunch of things plus your digital nomad um, immigration. So this is a heads up, right? This is a heads up for you to understand that whatever it's our experience is not going to translate in what you're going to see happening in either an embassy or a consulate, right? Now, this said, in Brazil, the way we structure this is as long as you're making at least 1,500, and in your case, yes, you're making more than 1,500, we're going to structure you as an employee of your business, right? Because at least in Brazil, the Brazilian immigration has a hard time understanding business owners, right? Like, and whenever people start to provide documents such as, I don't know, articles of incorporation, an operating agreement, you know, like a bunch of things, the Brazilian immigration says, listen, I don't even have in my checklist a place, to check when you send me this bunch of papers I never asked you for, right? And then when they expect you to provide either a contract or a letter of verification, guess what? You're not providing. So you are providing a bunch of things they never asked in the first place, and you're not providing the things that they are expecting from you. And guess what? Not surprisingly, most people who follow that route, they are going to be denied. So the way we structure in Brazil is going to be by having, the company providing the letter of verification to the applicant who happens to be the owner of the entity, right? And we try to make this in a very transparent manner. It's not like that we are hiding that you are the owner, but we are taking your, facts and addressing them in a way that we know it's gonna be compatible to the checklist that the Brazilian immigration has for the digital nomad. Okay, the 1,500 a month, it's compliant, Wally. I think here your challenge would be more like on how to present your work as a digital nomad based on a company that you own. All right, Didi is asking, I had a dual citizenship, but years ago the Brazilian consulate took my passport and denied my Brazilian documents twice. Why wouldn't they still have my Brazilian passport information? Denied my Brazilian documents, right? Yeah, I mean, if you had a dual citizenship, right? Like, I mean, unless you renounced for your citizenship, you are still a Brazilian. Okay, Didi. So nothing here tells me that you're no longer a Brazilian. That's the first point. Now, in terms of denying your Brazilian documents, something that has changed from a few years to now is that Brazil, in order to give you a new passport, they are going to make sure that you are absolutely compliant with your obligations in Brazil. And among those obligations, you should have an active Brazilian tax ID known as a CPF. You should have an active voting card. You should have voted in every single last presidential election, right? Remember, like in Brazil, it's not like in the United States. In the United States, you vote if you want. Not in Brazil. In Brazil, it's mandatory for people to vote in elections. So, in addition to those things, Didi, if you are a man, you also needed to enroll in military service. And in addition to that, if you had a name change, if you had a marriage, or if you had a divorce, all of those things must have been recorded in Brazil. So, assuming, Didi, that you are an adult, right? Or let's say if you are in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s, it's not surprising that you are having a hard time getting a new passport, right? Because particularly if you are, in your 40s or in your 50s, guess what? You have an entire life of events that may not have been recorded, right? And I'm just like, this is just a hypothesis, right? I don't know your specifics, but let's say if those things, if they were not recorded in Brazil, the Brazilian consulate is going to take this opportunity to tell you, listen, Didi, you got to go back and fix all of those things before I give you a new passport. All right, Didi. So that's the new approach. That's something new. And that's what's making, people confused about the process, because they say, well, last time I went there, I just applied for a passport and I got it. And now they are asking me for all of those things. Yes, that's because of this change of this, let's say, approach by the Brazilian government to forcing Brazilians to be completely up to date with their civil life in Brazil before they can get a passport from the consulate. All right, Didi, I hope that was helpful. Mozin Raza, welcome, Mozin. Hello, sir. How are you? I'm pretty well, Mozin. Statement is true. For citizenship by marriage, no residency is required in Brazil if you have children with your spouse. No, Mozin. Like, I mean, first thing, like, you never, there is no citizenship by marriage. That doesn't exist, okay? What you can get through marriage is actually the residency in Brazil, okay? So nobody gets citizenship by marriage. What you get through marriage is going to be the residency in Brazil. And for you to get the residency, you're gonna need to be residing in Brazil in the first place, right? So the sequence: you come to Brazil, you are a resident of Brazil already, resident in terms of either renting a property or be living, I don't know, in your spouse's parents' house, or anything like this. And then once you are physically in Brazil, that's when you can apply for the permanent residency through marriage, okay? And if you are residing in Brazil, yes, you're gonna secure, and of course you meet all the other requirements, you're gonna secure the permanent residency in Brazil. And then after 1 year of permanent residency in Brazil, as long as you are fluent in Portuguese, you know how to speak in Portuguese, you understand the Portuguese, you can write in Portuguese, you can read in Portuguese in an advanced manner, that's when you can secure the citizenship. But the citizenship you're not getting because you married, you are actually getting because you lived in Brazil for the minimum amount of time required. And if you have children with your spouse, that gives you another route to apply for the residency, which is like residency because I have Brazilian children. But again, the citizenship is going to come later on because you've been in the country for an amount of time that meets the requirement. Gary Rappner, good to see you here, Gary. Good afternoon, Dr. Oliveira. My wife has dual citizenship, Brazil and the United States. She wants to sell 3 apartments in Barra da Tijuca. Thinking about selling the properties. The capital gain is better. Right. So, yes, if she's going to sell the properties and you're not going to, and she is probably not living in Rio de Janeiro, right? that means that as soon as she sells the property, she's going to need to pay the capital gain tax on the spot, all right? So just consider that, which is usually 15%. So whatever capital gain she's getting, remember, she's going to need to pay 15% on that capital gain. All right. Now, one more thing for you to consider. Right now, the U.S. currency is pretty high in exchange for the Brazilian reais, right? So whenever you get the Brazilian reais, if you guys are planning to convert into U.S. dollars, guess what? You're gonna get substantially less U.S. dollars than you would get a year ago. Okay, so just a heads up that usually the current currency exchange rate is pretty favorable to buyers, not sellers, Gary. But listen, I understand sometimes there are things you need to accomplish. I don't know if that situation is one of those in which you cannot postpone a sell, but just letting you know so you can factor that into your decision process. Bill, thank you, my friend. Don't forget to like. Yes, hit that thumbs up button. I really appreciate, Bill. That's really something that I would like to ask you. If you are here with us in our live stream, please hit that button. We have 20 viewers right now and only 10 likes. So I guess some of you could just click on that like button and help us develop our channel and help more people find our content, right? It's not much to ask. Please join Bill in the effort to click the like button. I appreciate Bill. AVBQ. As a Pakistani citizenship, can I get my digital nomad visa or not? If all requirements are clear. AVBQ, that's a very delicate question, right? Like in theory, if you meet the requirements, guess what? The Brazilian government should give you the digital nomad. But unfortunately, what we have in our experience is that the Brazilian consulates and embassies out there, they are making it more difficult for certain countries to secure the digital nomad, right? And they are even like removing the digital nomad from some countries. I can tell you one that I know for sure, like Haiti. Haiti, if you go to Haiti and if you try to apply to Haiti, there is basically no digital nomad route. So for people from Haiti, if they want to secure the digital nomad, first they will need to secure a visitor visa to Brazil, and after they enter Brazil, they would apply for the residency based digital nomad, right? So there is no such a thing as a digital nomad visa for people from Haiti, only the residency after they enter the country. And unfortunately, AVBQ, don't shoot the messenger. I know that Brazil does make difficult for people from Pakistan to secure the digital nomad visa. All right. So if you're gonna apply, a few tips: make sure that you meet those requirements big time, right? Like I mean, if you're just making like some people, they can tweak like how much they're gonna show on a bank statement because they are business owners. If they just see like the minimum requirements being met, there is a good chance they could still find a reason to deny your application. And unfortunately, they have no obligation to tell you why they are denying, right? Usually, the reasoning in the back of their heads, and they're not telling you, is that you are actually applying for the digital nomad not because you want to stay 1 or 2 years in Brazil, but because you want to actually come to Brazil and stay for good, right? That's their reasoning. It's not my reasoning, all right? I'm just telling you what happens to the Brazilian immigration, unfortunately, in Pakistan, right? And they apply the same type of reasoning. For instance, in the United Arab Emirates, we have a bunch of prospects. They schedule consultations with us. And unfortunately, there is not much we can do because, again, you would need to apply first to get a visa to come to Brazil, right? And then when you try to get a visa, they usually deny the applicants. Like there is something, that we don't know, AVBQ. Like, I mean, I don't have a notice, nobody told me, but by whatever is being told to us by the public in general, it looks like there is something very clear in the Brazilian immigration to make it difficult for people from some countries to come to Brazil. All right, VBQ. Moses Travels, welcome Moses. It has been a while. In the past, I have met several online brokers from different construction companies who asked me for my CPF so that they could register my interest in participating in the purchase of a future project. Moses, the CPF, right? Like the CPF is the Brazilian tax ID. You can usually get it through Brazilian consulate or embassy abroad. So let's say, just using the example I was just sharing, let's say if you live in the United Arab Emirates, you could basically schedule an appointment with the Brazilian embassy in Abu Dhabi, okay? And in Abu Dhabi, the Brazilian embassy would issue the CPF tax ID for you to buy real estate in Brazil. The Brazilian tax ID on the CPF is actually mandatory for things that are relevant from an economic perspective. So if you're going to buy property in Brazil, you cannot do so without the Brazilian tax ID known as a CPF. Something very interesting for you guys to note as well is that Brazilians, us Brazilians, right? We are not secret. We are not like very concerned about disclosing our CPFs, right? Because U.S. citizens, they are absolutely paranoid about social security numbers, right? Like, I mean, if someone would ask for your social security number let's say in a pharmacy, in a drugstore, like you would get mad, right? You say, "What do you mean, like you want my social security?" But that's exactly what happens. And I can tell if any of you have been to Brazil, often you were probably asked for the Brazilian tax ID. You could have been asked, I don't know, half dozen times a day while in Brazil, because again, we kind of use the Brazilian tax ID as probably our main ID in Brazil, right? So that's very interesting to share. But Moses, yes, the CPF is a must. And if you're gonna buy, a pre-construction company, that would be necessary. Now, the way you framed your question made me a little bit concerned, because you said so that they could register my interest in participating in the purchase of a future project, right? Is a kind of a funky way of saying so. This reminds me, Moses, of something that's going on in Rio de Janeiro as we speak, and I don't like at all. It goes like this, you are in Rio de Janeiro, and then you see a work site, right? A construction site, and within the construction site, you're gonna see a model apartment for a pre-construction project. And then you're going to assume it's just a regular pre-construction project, just like, any other project in Rio. But when you look at the documents, there is actually not even ownership of that land. It's almost like they're saying, you know what? I'm trying to buy this land here, but I'm not going to be able to do so unless I put together a number of interested people. And they are going to ask your money up front, and then they are going to put your money in their pockets while they don't even have secured the ownership of the land. That's very weird. That's not standard in either Rio de Janeiro or anywhere else in Brazil. But I've seen that happening more than once in Rio de Janeiro, and therefore my alert: whenever you're gonna get involved in pre-construction, you need to make sure that the developer has already bought the land, right? Like, I mean, you can't start to give money to someone who's not even owning the land in which the property is going to be developed. Another concern I have about pre-construction is the fact that nowadays, as per the Brazilian regulation, developers are able to disclaim a security deposit that they would have to fulfill 20 years ago. So 20 years ago or 30 years ago, the Brazilian legislative created a rule that for you to sell pre-construction, you will need a reserve, a substantial reserve, because in case something went wrong, like the buyers could come to this reserve and get their money back from the reserve. But guess what? Through the lobby of the construction companies nowadays, they can disclaim their fund as long as they give you notice as a prospective buyer of a pre-construction development. So, in other words, like this has made mute the first regulation saying that there should be a reserve fund for pre-construction developments, because nowadays everybody says, you know what, I'm not going to have this fund, not my problem, and if you want to buy my property, you got to say yes, otherwise I'm going to decline you as a buyer, right, Moses? So these are the two things I wanted to share about pre-construction projects in Brazil. Shauri, Shauri Rivastava. Sorry if the pronunciation is not on point. Hi, Luciano. Hi, Shauri. Can you please describe the process for dissolving a união estável? Does it involve settlement always in court by default? Or can there be a dissolution upon mutual agreement? Yes, Shari. So in theory, yes, you could have the dissolution by the same means you can get a união estável made official, right? Like, so if you are in a união estável, meaning a common law marriage, right? Meaning you never married with the person, there is a way for you to make that official, and you can basically go to a cartório, which means a registry in Brazil. There is a specific type of registry, which is called ofício de notas. And through this registry, you can, sign an official paper with the presence of the officer, of witnesses, that you guys are making official a união estável, right? So through the same process in theory, you can kind of say, you know what, like we are ending this união estável, okay? Now, in order for you to do that, of course, there are certain requirements, like you should not have children. If you have children, then you cannot disclaim your união estável without a court. And the second thing, if your união estável partner is somewhat disabled, the cartório is not going to allow that to happen without the participation of a court. Okay, Shari. There are many other nuances, but maybe from a really high overview, that would be, kind of how it works. Moses Travels launch. By now, I'm afraid that they have my CPF and can use it for fraudulent activities. Moses, we can never say never, right? Like, I mean, unfortunately, fraudsters, either in Brazil, the US, Europe, Asia, they are very creative, so we can never say never. But again, Moses, in Brazil, a CPF is something absolutely common for one to, give out. So I wouldn't be too concerned, right? Unless, of course, that whoever took your CPF is actually a scammer, then it's a different story. But in general, Moses, if you are, in Brazil, and if you go to a drugstore, you're gonna buy, a painkiller, right? Believe it or not, like the drugstore is gonna ask for your CPF. So you can tell just by this story that, a CPF is far from being something as confidential as a Social Security is in the United States. All right, Moses, following up, how does investment visa look like in the first time when it's gotten? Is it a stamp in my country's passport? So there are two tracks, Moses. There is one that's completely entire in Brazil, okay? And if you secure the real estate investment in Brazil, then what you're gonna get is actually the card, and then we say that you secured the residency by investment in real estate. Okay, that's one of the routes. The second route is gonna be when we send your files to the consulate in charge of your address abroad, and then through the consulate, you're not gonna get, of course, the card. Then you're gonna get an actual visa stamped on your passport. But interesting enough, after you get this visa and you come to Brazil, you enter Brazil, and then you are supposed to do what? To apply for the same card, right? So nowadays, most of our clients, they are basically just skipping. They are skipping on the visa piece because it does add a good number of months on top of the residency, right? Like you're gonna need to interact with the consulate. The consulates usually they are not super, efficient. So most of our clients they say, you know what, like if you can, skip on the consulate piece, I'm gonna be very happy, and we are happy as well because it's less work. We apply directly in Brazil for your residency. You come to Brazil after you bought the property, right? And then you're gonna secure the resident card. All right, we have a Wally. Once my Brazil digital nomad visa is approved, I plan to apply for a dependent visa for my wife so she can join me legally in Brazil. How I intend to approach this process so the chances of approval, I'm gonna assume, are maximum, right, Wally? So Wally, this is usually a hit or a miss. In reality, like if you think about the digital nomad visa being a low hanging fruit, it's not really ideal for you to ask for a dependent visa for either a spouse or a child, because the way that Brazil sees the digital nomad is more like a standalone thing, is more like someone who's traveling around the world and staying for specific periods of time. When you start to mention that you're gonna get like a dependent visa to a spouse, it does trigger the bell for the immigration authority that you are actually planning to live in Brazil for good. Okay, so they can tell right after you ask for this thing. So something that could happen, particularly for those countries that I was mentioning. It could be, Pakistan, it could be Nigeria, it could be the United Arab Emirates. Something that we saw happening before, right? The person is going to apply for a visitor's visa, and at the same time, they are asking for an apostilled or for a legalized birth certificate, not for only the applicant, but for the family of the applicant as well. And guess what? Immigration is going to immediately think that you're going to move to Brazil for good, and they are going to deny your requests across the board. And not only that, but this denial is going to be in your profile. So when you try something down the road, down the line, they are going to have a memory of that particular denial. Okay, Wally? So giving you this information, again, not my place to say if it's fair or not. I'm just sharing with you a little bit of our experience so you can factor that into your planning. Brazilian need a visa to visit China. Moses, 99% sure that we do. Okay, 99% that we do. And it does change every now and then, but I know that Brazil does require China to have a visa, and Brazil, most of the time is going to be operating on a reciprocity basis, and therefore, that's the conclusion. Okay. Sean, is the capital gains rate for tax residents 15% for selling common stock? Essentially, are there certain types of income that are tax advantaged? Sean, so the 15% is a very, preferred type of tax rate. In Brazil, we have up to 27.5% of, tax rate. So if you are getting 50%, that's already a preferred. Bracket. If I'm not mistaken, I don't recall. I don't specialize in taxation in Brazil. But if I had it to guess, or if I remember correctly, 15% is also going to be this type of preferred tax bracket whenever you have profits from a financial investment, if you will. All right, Churin Mitchell, good afternoon. Welcome, Churin. I will retire at the end of this year. When should I start my application for a retirement visa? Churin, so you're not gonna be able to apply before you have like 3 months worth of a bank statement, right? So, um, you know, it's really up to you when you're gonna come to Brazil. We have some clients. They say, "Listen, I don't wanna wait until I get the retirement." So what we do for them is like they come over under a digital nomad, right? And then once they have like the 3 months of a bank statement showing that they're drawing the retirement, that's when they are gonna apply for the retirement visa, right? But you cannot apply prior. You are actually drawing from your retirement accounts. Okay, Charin. Hermavan Lee. Hi, Hermavan. Dear Mr. Oliveira, Indonesian citizens can enter visa-free to Brazil. However, would they have a difficult time getting the digital nomad visa? I'm from Indonesia, but of Chinese descent. Uh, Listen, Lee, that's a very interesting question. And in our experience, once you enter Brazil, Brazil is going to make no distinction in terms of you securing the digital nomad residency. Okay, so and by the way, visa, we technically call it visa when you apply abroad through an embassy or consulate. But when you apply in Brazil, it's always going to be a digital nomad residency, right? It's more like a technicality. You're still getting the same 1 year. You get the card. You get everything the same, okay? But when you apply in Brazil, we call it a residency. But I can tell you, if you can enter visa-free, very good for you, Hermavan, because then once you enter Brazil, you can apply just like everyone else. In our experience, the Brazilian immigration in Brazil does not make the same type of distinction that they do abroad, unfortunately. By kind of making it harder for some countries to secure the digital nomad abroad. So you enter Brazil, you should be able to secure as long as you meet the requirements. All right. All right, Marcia Cabral Hepner, to be for a non-resident or resident in Brazil. Marcia, I'm not sure if you asked something before. Let me scroll up here. No, Marcia, I'm not finding a piece of information prior to be for a non-resident or resident in Brazil. Right. So maybe that's the question by itself, right, Marcia? So you may be asking like, should I be a non-resident or a resident in Brazil? And based on your name, I'm gonna make an assumption, and then you're gonna forgive me if that assumption is wrong. I'm gonna assume, Marcia, that you are a Brazilian living abroad, and you are asking me, Luciano, should I be a non-resident or should I be a resident in Brazil? And there is no single answer, Marcia, if that's your scenario, right? And I know many Brazilians who live in the United States who absolutely want to remain a resident in Brazil. By remaining a resident in Brazil, they are going to pay taxes in the United States and in Brazil as well. They're going to pay taxes in both countries. So why would they want to do that? Because then they can own companies, they can manage their companies, they can invest in stocks, they can have regular bank accounts, they can use funds like XP investments, and they can make dozens of things a non-resident is not going to be able to do in Brazil. So again, a bunch of Brazilians living abroad in the United States, they absolutely want to be tax residents in Brazil, okay? On the other hand, if you don't have a company in Brazil, you don't want to invest in Brazil, you don't need a regular account in Brazil, why would you have a tax resident status in Brazil? You're much better off by remaining a non-resident in the a non-resident in Brazil and just a resident in the United States. All right, Marcia. So very simplified explanation. I hope that makes sense. You may want to schedule a consultation to know more specifics, or to have a better explanation based on your specifics, if you will. Fusio Priming, boa tarde do Alasca. Boa tarde, Fusio. Good afternoon. Good to see you over here. Now, a heads up, we are at it's 4:55 p.m. I had a snafu here in my live stream, so I started 30 minutes late, even though I was talking by myself for 30 minutes. So I'm gonna, end up in about 5 minutes from now. But don't forget, we have our live stream. Our next live stream is scheduled for Wednesday. It's gonna be at 12:30 p.m. Rio de Janeiro time as usual. And if you didn't have an opportunity to participate, to share a topic of your interest, just come back on Wednesday, and we're gonna be for sure addressing the topic of your interest. And let me take an additional couple of topics here. Sean, for the digital nomad visa, is a separate entity required? Also, does your firm advise on the work contract itself if one doesn't currently exist? So, Sean, for Brazil, you need some type of entity providing a letter of verification. It doesn't need to be a contract, a fully fledged contract. And yes, for those of you hiring our services, we actually have templates to make your life easier, the life of your employer or client or a contracting party easier. So yes, we have templates here that you can use in the application process. Now, we never had any single application here at the firm for a person working for another person, right? We just think, this is not really easy for the Brazilian immigration to understand, and therefore we would not bring a case like this into the company. And therefore, the answer is yes, there should be some type of entity in the loop vouching for your work abroad. All right, Sean. And we have Chigo Dyke. Chigo, nice to meet you. Can I apply for the Brazilian retirement visa if I'm under 60 years old? How strict are they on the age requirement? Chigo, I have good news for you. They are zero strict on the age requirement. We have, now I can say, because for the last 6 months, I was saying, well, we have an applicant from, with 20 years and something, applying, our, youngest client in his 30s, and now we have a client for the retirement visa in his 20s. All right, so zero concern about the age, Chigo. The concern is on qualifying income. If you have a qualifying income, no matter your age, you are good to apply in Brazil. Just clarifying, our client who's in his 20s, he's actually a disabled veteran, right? So he has disability enough funds for him to retire in Brazil. And that's what Brazil cares about. Brazil does not care about age. Another a spin-off of that question, Chigo, is that people are going to ask, well, I'm working. Is Brazil going to, prohibit me from working? It would make zero sense for Brazil to not allow you to work. Imagine Brazil saying, well, you know what? I want a people who are going to be dying of boredom, and therefore I'm not going to allow them to work. It makes zero sense for either Brazil or any other country for that matter to prohibit someone from having a fulfilling life, right? Like a life that's benefiting others. So Brazil would never have such a requirement. Brazil lets you work. Brazil is going to be happy that you are making yourself useful. And that's the same concept on the age requirement. Brazil is not going to want to bring people only when they are 70 or 80. Brazil wants people at any age bracket coming to Brazil under the retirement route. All right, Chigo? As long as you have the qualifying retirement income. All right, folks, now we are sharp 5 p.m. on the clock. Today I went above and beyond. I've been here with you guys, even though you didn't see me for the first 30 minutes. I've been here for an hour and a half. So I'm going to be back with you on Wednesday. Make sure to come to our channel and click on notify me. So on Wednesday, as soon as I start the live stream, you're going to get a notice. And I thank you, everyone who participated here with comments, with questions. I appreciate the number of likes. That's very welcome. And I wish you guys a blessed rest of your Sunday.